And then we have Liz Kochis?
Kochis.
Kochis, okay. I wasn't sure about the pronunciation there. Liz.
Many people aren't.
So Liz is a music therapist, board certified. She's got a certificate in Neurologic Music Therapy.
Mm-hmm.
And she is a worship leader at Gateway Presbyterian Church, and they're accompanist. So today, we welcome Liz.
I tend to do a lot of presentations with experiential things. And so I'm going to get kind of close, if you don't mind. Because I'm used to like, okay. I want you just to do something with me, something not so crazy that'll seem a little weird at first. I want you to fill in the blank, okay? Da, 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 da. See? Well, that was a more extended one, yeah. Or dum, bum, bum, bum. So, how'd you know that? Ooh, learned it. Do you remember how you learned it? Somewhere along the way. And I will tell you that every human being, I love this word that one of my professors had given me, we are scaffolded for music. All the elements of music, we already have that structure in our brains when we are birthed. And it is the unformed brain, the injured brain, or the injured body that takes that ability away from us. And so more on that in a little bit too. I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to do many of my experiential things today just because we need room for it. But I do have a lot of props up here that we may get to or we may not. But you can see what I would haul around to any like hospital room or long-term care facility room or someone's house when I went to their house, especially for the first time, not knowing what we were going to do in music therapy. So among the things that you have to be a good packer and you have to be, able to make a couple of quick trips to your car. So who has ever heard of music therapy? A few people have. Okay. Has anyone ever been a patient or a client of a music therapist? Okay. Have you known someone to be a patient or a client of a music therapist? Can I ask you in what context? For the two of you that raised your hand?
I was an oncology nurse.
Okay.
And we did anything the patient wanted.
So did you have a board-certified music therapist in your staff? And they would. Okay. And what did you observe or hear about when a music therapist went to visit one of your oncology patients?
I'm sorry, say it again.
And what did you observe or hear about that interaction?
I came during the day and I was there at night, so I heard about it later.
What did you hear about it?
How healing it was.
How healing the music was. Okay. And how about you?
I had a doctor who had Alzheimer's, and the only thing that comforted her was music from her youth,
Mm-hmm.
and it made her calm and content.
Yeah. So this is an often heard story, which I love, is that someone with Alzheimer's had been comforted and calmed and more content with the use of music. Yes. So has music ever had an effect on any of you?
Of course, it starts me dancing.
Starts you dancing. Holler it out. What else? What else does it do for you?
Emotion, tears.
Singing and happiness. Emotion. Calming. Connectedness. Memories. And you are all right? So, because we are programmed, we are scaffolded, we are created to process music in every single part of our brain. From the part that back here that controls things like breathing and heart rate, all the way through to our brain up here, which is what we call executive function, which helps our decision making. It helps us sequence things. It's 100 different things that happen up here. It's what makes me just slightly different than my dog, because I have more up here. But she's a cooler creature than I am most days of the week. And what a really interesting thing is right in the middle of our brain, we process a lot of emotion. and we process a lot of memory in there. And that's a really strong place in our brains where music is processed. So that is why it's like, oh man, I remember that song. I was back in high school. Or I remember that was our first dance at our wedding. Or, and you guys can fill in all the blanks there, can't you? You have that song or that genre or that time period. It's like, oh yeah, it takes you right back, right? And often it will bring up emotion, all the emotions from being happy to being sad to doing all of that. And that is what the fun thing for me working as a music therapist with people with brain injury, with degenerative disease, or with an injury to their brain is that, wow, that stuff is right there and I can access it. So, what do you think I do as a music therapist? Usually I have you write this down so it can be like on a secret paper in case it's like different than what you want it to be later. So what do you think I do as a music therapist? I remind you of the power of music. I hope so. I hope to do that too as a music director over at the church that I'm playing hooky from today too, because yes, music is so powerful. And I'm just going to put a little aside here for David today. David and I are friends. And so that's how I mostly am here today. But I sat next to someone today who says, you know, the first time he was invited to come in the building because he liked the building, and the reason he comes back frequently is he so enjoys the organ playing and the organist. He says that is what keeps him coming back. So I don't know if David knows that, but now you do. So yes, music, I can remind you what music can do. What else do you think I do? Yeah.
Stimulate neurons.
Yes, I do. I stimulate neurons. Stimulate neurons. Yes, I do ask people what they listen to and what they enjoy, and they definitely, folks who I work with definitely have some agency over that. Yes. Yeah, try to find songs that connect with the person or the group. Yeah.
So do you go around and do you have a bunch of little pieces of standard music that when they say something and then you play it for them?
Sometimes, if I'm lucky. Sometimes, yes. A lot of times, I would say about 60% of the time, 60 to 70% of the time, we create our own music in music therapy. And so that is a really good segue into this. So music therapy, the power of music, the effects of music have been documented for a long time. There's even biblical reference to it. However, it was as soldiers were returning from World War II, at Walter Reed specifically, they were being hospitalized for obviously physical things that happened to them on the battlefield, and then more puzzlingly, what we know now as PTSD. Yes, and so they found that music, when used well, can really have an effect on people. But it can also have kind of a detrimental effect if you didn't know quite what was happening. So in 1950, the very first degreed music therapy program was established. I graduated a few years after that. My bachelor's in music therapy degrees, or bachelor's and master's in music therapy, I got at CSU up in Fort Collins, which has one of the largest undergraduate programs in music therapy. And then let me get some other fun facts for you, or semi-fun facts. Won't be as fun as shaking some of these things up here. But during that education part of things, we have almost 2,000 hours of clinical work that we have to complete. We have a 4-year undergraduate degree that is usually just about 5 years. 4 equals 5 in this case. We have 130 credit hours with liberal studies, core courses, behavioral sciences, neuroscience, natural science, and oral skills, and then we have all the stuff. We have music theory, we have music history, we have all the performance stuff that a musician has to have. in addition to our music therapy specific. Classroom training is about, I switch this around, classroom training is about 6,000 hours, and then we have clinical practica within that undergraduate, and we also have a 6-month clinical internship after that. So we have about 1,500 of clinical hours that we need to complete to then sit for our boards and become board certified. Colorado is, strangely, one of the few states where we don't have title protection. So if you wanted, you could go out and say you're a music therapist, but I would have to give you the stink eye for that and say, yeah, which is kind of what my thing is today, too, not giving you the stink eye, but all this stuff that we have to do to become a board certified music therapist.
A question, do you have to have an apprenticeship working under a music therapist?
And that's our 6-month internship post our 4 or 5-year degree. We also have 3 mandatory clinical practica within that degree. So as a junior, we have 1, and as a senior, we had 2. I had 4 because I was a research person. So yeah, many of us do. It's not required, but we do have to have 100 hours of continuing education every 4 years. Yeah. Yeah, so it pays to have a mentor or an additional program you're working with. Like mine is Neurologic Music Therapy, as well as the Music and Imagery, which takes about 6 more years to complete. So, yeah. So after all of that, we are able to work with older adults, people with dementia and other brain injury, terminally ill, post-stroke, and other medical emergencies in the rehabilitative scene. So we work with OTs and PTs in addictions, developmentally delayed people, autism, learning challenges, the incarcerated, chronic and acute mental illness, mental health, pregnancy and childbirth, and wellness programs and general support groups. In many kinds of facilities like long-term care, day programs, people's homes, prisons, medical hospitals, psychiatric units and hospitals, schools, hospice, in and outpatient rehabilitation, etc., etc. Yeah, did you have a question?
Yeah, where do the majority of your folks with this expertise work? Do they work on their own, or do they work for like health systems?
If you're not living in Colorado or the Mountain West, you're usually fully employed with an agency. Colorado has always been a challenging state, so we're usually self-employed or work long and hard to be like a part-time or a almost full-time person. Denver and North have a lot more of that going on. I have lived in Colorado Springs for much of the last 30 years, and still, I've seen a few more music therapists in town, but not as much. And for a number of years, I was working 2 weeks a month in Grand Junction with Hope West, which is hospice and palliative care on the western slope. So that's where I went to work part-time for a while. So, yes. Let me just give you a couple little definitions, and I know you're cooking up some more questions here too, and that is totally fine. So the way that our national organization defines music therapy is that it is an established healthcare profession that uses music to address physical, emotional, cognitive, and social needs of individuals of all ages. Music therapy improves the quality of life for persons who are well and meets the needs of adults and children with disabilities or illnesses. Music therapy interventions can be designed to promote wellness, manage stress, alleviate pain, express feelings, enhance memory, improve communication, and promote physical rehabilitation. Now we have neurologic music therapy, which we always knew this stuff worked, right? Because you told me it works for you. But now that we have, especially with the functional MRI, we can say, oh, that's what's happening in our brain when that happens. Nothing else can do that for us. And so we have a big old pile of empirical research that's out there, have all through the years, but neurologic music therapy has enhanced that quite a bit. So it has moved from being a social science, where we know it was helping people. We were doing that to a neuroscience, which is now we know exactly what's happening and we can even more tailor our approach. Once we know someone's needs, then we can create goals for everyday life. Then we translate that stuff into a music intervention. We work on that, we collect data, and then we say, okay, now with this music intervention, how is that relating to that everyday life task again? And then we continue to assess and implement our interventions. So, yeah. Let's see. So, another little definition, and then I'll be done with the definitions. So, NMT says that it's the therapeutic application of music to cognitive, affective, which is emotional, sensory, language, and motor dysfunctions due to disease or injury to the human nervous system. It's based on neuroscientific models of music perception and production, the influence of music on changes in our non-musical brain and behavior. So here's the great quote that if nothing else that you leave with today, one of our pioneers in the field, I was lucky to have him both as an undergraduate and a graduate student, Michael Tout. He said, the brain that engages in music is also changed by engaging in the music. So did you know that your brain was being changed when you sang the hymns today? Yes. And so it can engage the brain and it can train the brain. And my job as a therapist is to do that in the most therapeutically effective way possible. Houston Methodist, Seasons Hospice, Johns Hopkins, there's a biomedical research in music at CSU, there's a lot of places we are. I would love to see more of that here, of course. And as I alluded to, my experience has been primarily, well, not primarily, I have quite of a broad experience. I think the bulk of my experience has been in end-of-life care and in bereavement, also with brain injury and dementia, things that have affected either on a temporary basis or on a progressive basis, something that has affected the way that our brains engage and can task ourselves. So that has been my primary focus through my career. I've also worked in mental health quite a bit with all the ages. I've worked in an adolescent, back when adolescent long-term care for mental health was a thing. I worked in a facility there, and I've done a lot with adults and older adults as far as mental health and mental illness is concerned. So, yeah. Are you thinking of more questions? I like the questions as we go, I think, especially since we aren't going to be banging on drums and shaking the shakers. Yeah.
So, my father
Thank you.
have actual
Sorry, I should have just thought of that at the beginning.
My father had dementia. It wasn't Alzheimer's, it was something else. But he didn't have formal music therapy, but what we noticed was that if you said the first 3 lines, his name was Alfred Olaf Hansson. If you sang the first 3 lines of the Norwegian national anthem, he wasn't born in Norway, he was born in North Dakota.
Close enough.
But both of his parents were Norwegian. He would sing the whole thing.
Yep.
And he couldn't remember who was his wife, or he thought I was his twin sister, and all these things, but he could remember music, certain things would just,
Yep.
out it would go. Now how does that work?
Music is, again, we're scaffolded for it. Our culture has music in it, because I bet you all know, you are my, you know that, but we didn't really sit down in music class and learn it. And older folk songs, so it's cultural as well, because I couldn't do that in another place, perhaps, with that. But it's still cooking in there, it's still being processed, and it's music can be overlearned. Because of the rhythm, because of its temporal structure that it has, that we've heard and we've rehearsed and we feel, because every movement, every healthy movement has a rhythm to it, and so it's been there, latent. Because what we've done with these little fill in the blanky things right now, if you had any of you had dementia right now, you'd still be able to function at that level, because that's what music has done for us over time, and we still have that in us. And as a therapist, Right. And I will say that I have worked with people with dementia too, but especially with brain injuries. Our brains are plastic, right? We have neuroplasticity. If you have had damage to one train, like if I know this person by this series of events, or I know my phone number, this pathway, music can train a new pathway. We can often bypass the place where the injury has occurred. That's why we're used a lot with speech rehabilitation. And so, and as a music therapist, if I had seen him as his music therapist, what I would do is, watch for the things that not only is he remembering it, but what is his affect doing? Does he then after that interact with you more, or try to interact with you more? Usually that's what I find. And of course then I turn it back to the folks with whom he's singing. What does that do to you when you were able to see that and hear that? Yeah. Well, and you saw him interact in a way he could that you hadn't seen. Yeah, it's not lost. It's not lost. Yeah.
Another story, my daughter has developmental disability and cerebral palsy.
Mm-hmm.
So of course she has speech difficulty.
Mm-hmm.
That's just part of the package. And especially when she was little, she's had hours of speech therapy that's helped, but especially when she was little, if she couldn't think of the word that she needed or how to say it, she could sing it.
Yep. Yep. Because her brain is working on all those alternative pathways. And the really cool thing is we don't have to just, like with speech, it goes this way, but with music, it goes both ways, and we can often rewire or help to rewire that. And that's a really neat story, because are you all familiar with Gabby Giffords, the congresswoman who was shot? She got her ability to speak back through music therapy. And she practices, she still practices, and she's able to say, okay, I can't get that word, let me approach it through music. And because
When she was little, we used to call her jukebox, because she didn't have good verbal skills, but she knew the lyrics to every song on the radio.
Mm-hmm. And as a music therapist, they could work with how she's producing that sound and stringing together more words to be able to find more words and more ways to communicate, so she could tap into that music thing, which would tap into her strictly spoken word too. So, yeah.
Along those same lines, Liz, I went to college with a fellow who had a pretty profound stutter,
Mm-hmm.
and he would get stuck on certain syllables, especially consonants, but he could sing through them
Mm-hmm.
and go, completely right through the stutter,
Yeah.
and bypass that
Yeah.
circuitry.
Bypass and relearn. People with Parkinson's disease. Has anyone ever known someone with Parkinson's?
Yeah.
And you know how their gait becomes more unsteady and more uneven. If you have a healthy functioning brain, you have a rhythm. You have a tempo, you have a rhythm, your gait is a particular size. When we put all the mathematical equations together, as a music therapist and physical therapist, we can create a music experience that when the person is listening to an external temporal rhythm, they can walk. And it's a practice thing, just like anything. It's a practice thing, and it'll last for a while, and then sometimes it's like the floor changes. Like maybe there's a rug or there's bright light here that kind of stymies that brain for a little bit. Then we restructure the music intervention so that they can walk through the door. So music can help restructure a lot of things, from speech to movement, and what I've worked extensively with is cognitive, which includes the facts and the figures, that includes emotional output, that includes communication skills, like I'm talking now and then you talk, which if we do another one of these, we'll just get out all the instruments and do all this stuff, and I'll go, oh yeah, that's how that works. Yeah, I'm gonna take the one in the back first, and then I will get you.
So I have two questions. At the university, we have the Lyda Hill Resilience Institute, it was started by a health psychologist, and they use all kinds of arts, but I don't remember specifically that they've had any programs on music, and I wondered if you worked with them. And in the same vein, the Ormeo Dance Studio has done incredible things with the Institute on Aging, with Parkinson's and other limited physical things. And they did an exhibition at the Fine Arts Center last summer, working with a class from Hillside Community Center.
Nice.
And it was just really amazing. So I wonder if how often you combine that with movement.
In my earlier career, I did that more because I was working with a lot of teenagers and other people who had a hard time articulating things, and so we would take it to that other level of simply movement. And then, so I don't have as much of that in my current practice, and I'm really happy to hear about those two things locally. Yeah, so now I have questions for you. Yes.
Going back to the demonstration with Parkinson's, you have played the music for them and they're walking to it. Can they internalize that and hum to themselves?
They do a lot of things. So what we do after we figure out what works is often they go home and practice. And so they come in for periodic time with music and physical therapy together, and then that's one of the few instances where that I would even say, yeah, headphones are a good idea, because then they can have music to help them, and then they can get, if they can, earlier stages of this progression, they can tap to themselves. This is a live created music thing, and so sometimes we have them be part of the music creation. A lot of times music therapists, when they're working with us, have an auto harp, sometimes a guitar, but that's a little bit bulky, but they are in front of them walking backwards so that they really see the beat as well as feel the beat as well as hear the beat. And our brains, if I were to just, I've done this before, a little tricky in this environment, had everyone stand up and say, okay, just walk around a little bit, and then if without you knowing it, I could start a beat, most of you would be able to organize, because your brain is doing it for you without telling you, you'd be able to organize that movement. So, yeah. I'd like to give you a couple clinical examples before we go today. I love doing this part, although it's, since I am a feeling being too, and a 4 on the Enneagram. Ooh, I know, all of you. Actually, my first two days of Enneagram workshop were right in that room over there in 2018. So if you were there, I was. I do a lot of songwriting with people. So here's an answer to maybe a partial answer to your question. A lot of times in hospice, I would get referrals for everybody, because once they knew what all this stuff was going on with music therapy, it's like, ooh, we want this person, we want this person. I usually would get the people who were whose symptoms were harder to manage, who weren't responding to much of anything, who had so much pain, who couldn't verbally tell you things anymore. So I was lucky. I was so lucky to work with folks like that. And I need a sip of water before I do this. There is, so I'm going to give you some examples of what we did. There was a woman, when I met her social worker introduced me to her. She was in bed. She was, 86, 87, very contractured, very much in pain, slept a lot. I said, she doesn't talk anymore. She's never talked well on hospice services, but maybe you could help with some of that pain management and just, quality of life. So I took my ensemble of random things and we found our way. I started singing for her, and yes, I knew the diagnoses, because I look at the diagnoses and what are our goals and how can I structure something musical that is functional in a non-musical life. So I started singing, and her eyes opened. She was able to open her eyes. Okay, good. She followed the music wherever I had it. That's a huge thing if you can track music. Okay, she's with me. She's breathing faster. She's kind of moving around looking for it. And so then we were able to start singing together. She started singing with me. So a couple of the sessions were seeing how much she knew. How is her articulation? how does she interact with me verbally after we sing? And it was like, whoa, it was amazing. I ended up finding out that she grew up on a ranch and that she and her 3 brothers had a band. She played dulcimer, she sang, she taught me how, she had really nice looking hands, and I said, how did you have such nice looking hands at 85? You know, I don't, and I'm, and she said, have the men do the dishes. So someone who was not responsive at all had all this response, you know, once we started our sessions, and so then I could tailor it, and so we wrote songs. And I'm not really warmed up today. I've had a lot of gunk. I think there's a lot of gunk in the air, so we'll see how this goes. She loved Hey Good Lookin'. So here's how we rewrote the song. Hey there, Thelma. Her name was Thelma. What you got cooking? I'm cooking up some chicken and dumplings. So I would ask her questions, and she would respond. Hey there, Liz. Don't you think maybe? And then she responded, you could bake up a nice peach pie. We'll leave out the carrots and the green beans, but we'll have some broccoli and okra. We'll put a scoop of ice cream on that pie and wash it down with a glass of iced tea. Well, Thelma and Liz, her response, must be hungry because they just cleaned up their plates. Wow. So when I go to care conferences and they say, okay, how is this patient doing? And then I would say all this, they were like, you can't like really say that because they're going to think, you know, all the reviewers, Medicare, et cetera, would think that, you know, she's not like eligible for hospice care anymore. And of course, I know how to manage and to elicit all this stuff through music. So I was okay with all that documentation, but yeah. Another man, he was actually a psychiatrist. He had some dysphagia, an expressive aphasia, which is how you speak and you process what you want to speak, dementia, cerebral vascular disease, I need more water, arthritis, hypertension, anxiety, major depressive disorder, and vascular dementia. He loved it when I would use like neuroscience words. So I did. So we did a lot of brain training. We did a lot with instruments. We did play faster than I do. You lead this activity. Is this louder or quieter? Because it's amazing how much of that kind of escapes us after a while. He's able to do all of it. He was articulating very clearly. We'd also work on, he was in a chair when he was awake. And so we'd work on some physical things too. So we're doing musical stuff over here, and then I would change the direction of the drum, so we'd have to reach for it. Reaching is very important if you need to put salt on your potatoes or something. So we incorporated a lot of that functional movement in with these. And since I don't have and won't have video of all of this happening, I have another song. So we do a lot of this, and I think in the next song you'll find out some more reasons why I do this. So he wrote this to the tune of Country Roads. He grew up in Wichita Falls in Texas. Almost heaven, Wichita Falls. I'm going to speak this. Northern Texas, Wichita River. Life was great there, but it's not a pretty town. People were friendly where I grew up. And so the refrain goes, passenger train, take me home to the place I grew up, Wichita Falls. Northern Texas, take me home, Burlington route. I was popular, pitched for my baseball team. I played trumpet and lived close to the mayor. Saturday morning movies at the State. Lots of girlfriends, best friends Don, John, and Arnold. He's in his 80s. And then that little bridge in Country Roads. Miller Drugstore had a soda fountain. One of my friends had a charge account there. We had monks and vanilla cokes. The best part of it was charging all we ate. I never paid. So imagine what would happen if you're suddenly remembering all these things. You can imagine what his face looked like, what his interaction level was like. He was like getting on with everybody. Once he was done with music therapy, he'd go out to lunch and, yeah, yeah, and he was just really interactive with his table mates. Pretty nifty.
How long did your therapeutic practice go with these people?
Until they were either released from hospice, because some people take a break from hospice, and I'm sorry, how long would I see these people? Someone in the back was wondering about that. And so sometimes they graduated from hospice, sometimes they were readmitted, or until they died. Mm-hmm. And I have been with several people on the day of their passing and at passing.
And quick question then, why is it that we're not doing instruments?
I know, because I want you in little groups, and I want to, we can do something. We're going to do a couple things at the end, because especially since we're doing questions now, we can do an experiential thing. Yeah, I know, that's, because then you can experience it. It's really, David is at one of my presentations that had a lot of experience stuff in it, and I would certainly, like I said earlier, I'll come back. Different day of the week and an evening, I can do that. 2 more examples, 3 more, and I'll be quick. This man had heart failure, atrial fibrillation. He was getting more tired, more weak, more sleepy, more chest pain, very frustrated with his cognition and communication, and he basically, in short of breath, with shallow, pursed lips, his list is long. He told me the first session, I need purpose. He wanted to play the harmonica, so we did. He wanted to put on a recital. He wanted to learn some songs and put on a recital. So we worked a lot on breathing techniques, which help the short of breath, which helps to reduce your anxiety if you aren't air hungry all the time. It gives you some sense of control over what you have in there. And this is his recital program, March 11th, 2020. It happened to my job a couple of months later. I want to share this one because he was a little bit different. He was in his young 70s. He was somebody with a life of addiction, a life of a lot of emotional stuff. He had been married, had a son, was in Vietnam, came back pretty messed up. You can imagine how the discussion went. And there was an interest, because the long-term care facility he was at and the hospice team was a little puzzled at first by him, because they knew he needed something. He needed some resolution. He hadn't shared with very many people in his life that he was gay. And he had a pretty supportive community when he lived in California. He didn't have that in Colorado or Utah, where he had spent a lot of his life. And so we did a lot of processing around that with music. This is to the tune of Heart of Gold. I wanna feel good, I wanna be great. I've been a bum with no way out. It's my sexuality I never give out that keeps me in a closet where it's safe. Myrna was my way out. Myrna was his wife. I'm not going to sing the rest because this one meant a lot to me. I've been to Vietnam. I've been to hell and back. In the meantime, I gave up lots of shit. In the giving up, I found me. I'm a weird, happy, kind, and a sweetheart, and now I see the end with no regrets. I worked 2 weeks a month, so every now and then I had 3 weeks off. And my last session with him, he was feeling pretty weak. I said, "What do you want to do today?" He said, "Let's just listen to music." I told him I wasn't going to be back for 3 weeks, so he grabbed my hand and he put it next to his heart. We listened to some music for about 10 minutes. Then he turned the music off, rolled over, turned away from me in his bed, and he knew. He knew I wouldn't see him again. Last one, Marty. She was in her late 80s. They were worried about her because she was getting, quote, meaner. She had more falls, short of breath, unspecified dementia, kidney failure, hypertension, anxiety. She tended to space out and disengage from her environment. She isolated. Minimal responses to questions. She actually was part of a string quartet, semi-professional. I took her to a concert at CMU over in Grand Junction one Sunday afternoon, and it was like the world opened up again for her. Yeah. And then we started talking and doing other improvisation things with the instruments, and this is her song. I love snow, it is delightful, so I get all bundled up, then jump off a hill into a pile of snow, playing in my winter wonderland. It's so fun to go skiing, though I don't go too often. I slid on a sled and made a snowman, playing in my winter wonderland. When we're done, we can build a fire, drink hot chocolate, spiked with something good. Bourbon was her thing. Roast marshmallows and get nice and cozy before we go and do something else. And then she thought a long time about her last verse. Like make snowballs and hit the insincere, run down some folks in my chair. It's the reason I can't sleep, that murder I committed. Now I need a serious talk with God. She was just pissed off that everyone is telling her what to do and where to go and what time to be there. And people, I can attest to this. My mom was in a assisted living facility the last 6 months of her life, and I saw it firsthand earlier this year. We wouldn't choose that with a bunch of strangers around us telling us what to do, but she found a nice way out of those feelings of anger, and let me just hit you with my imaginary snowball. And so we worked through a lot of anger with that. I don't have a lot of the big drums today. Actually, what I have is a lot of things from First Congregational.
How do you get paid?
I rough people up.
Sounds like your work is angel. How do you get paid?
Many music therapists work with populations that get third-party reimbursed. We are third-party reimbursable. I've not done that because Medicare recognizes that music therapy is hugely important, but they won't reimburse us. Yeah, and so I charge a fee if I see people, and you know what? It would take like the joy out of my life to have to deal with insurance. Anybody else? Again, I have lots of mom stories about that. I have some anger. I want to throw some snowballs, or at least the squirrel. Here, catch. And so one of my things, and that's a really good question. I'm going to give you a euro.
Thank you.
Euro. To use appropriately, thank you. And because I am all for lowering the barriers in so many areas of life. And healthcare is one of them. I'll let you decide between the three of you who wants that. And so I have decided, and of course the journey with my mom has been the slowdown for this, but I am in the process of developing community music therapy groups for all sorts of things. Kabasa? And so, one for you. And I have spoken at 3 churches so far because I think that if we, I don't know, there's a solution somewhere out there, but the first groups I want to, that I found were needs in some of the other churches were people who had a form of dementia, still living at home and with the caregiver. So that will be one of my groups. I got a lot of, they're called owls at First Lutheran too. I thought as I was looking in your bulletin today, owls sounded familiar, so yay, owls. I'm gonna give you the drum. Well, you can share, you can like both. It's big enough. And then another big need that seems to be out there is a wellness group for people who are retired. And I have done that before too. I also found out that there is a lot of, and we know this, there's a lot of grief and loss out there right now. Or like always, but we're just kind of getting the impact of that. Oh, someone can take my jingles out of the, who can catch? Why don't you pass this to the woman behind you? I can throw things at David. So I'm debating how to structure that group, and there'll be, for things like a grief and loss group or a bereavement group, if that's also a necessity. Well, it is, but there will be like an 8-week, one fee kind of thing. For those with wellness, music therapy, or other things, we would have a drop-in fee. And my policy is if that is an encumbrance to someone, come in anyway. So that's just kind of how I roll. So if you have time when we're done to fill out a little survey for me, it just helps me to structure things. If you are interested or have other ideas for groups, or if you want to be kept in the loop when these groups start, that gives me a lot of good information. I won't spam you. I won't fill your inbox every week with memes, even though somebody in here gets memes quite frequently. You should have seen the one I sent David. It was about a bird trying to hit that low C on the organ. But other than that, and a great one about Brussels sprouts. Okay. That's mine. Usually that's in a big circle with drums and everything. So I'm gonna have our drummer over there. I'm gonna give you a beat here. I'm gonna give everyone their own thing. Okay? And you can just do it with your hand and smack that thing. So you get to keep the beat for us. So I'll show you. It'll go 1, 2, 3, 4. You do it. So I bet you're going to get some teamwork with holding this. So are you right-handed? Why don't you take your right hand? I know it's kind of hollow in there, isn't it? Take your right hand and put it on top there. And then just play with me. Good. And keep that going. You're going to keep that going over there. Okay, Ruro. I'm going to give you a... I need to. 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. Bum, ba bum, bum, ba bum, bum, ba bum, 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 bum. So you're going to play it with one hand on the outside and go. There you go. You got it. Dun 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 da 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 da. Huh? When you hear the wind chimes, you're going to stop, okay? Except the drum. The drum's going to keep going. Keep going, drum. Yeah. When you hear the wind chimes again, you're going to start. So there, you've already worked on auditory cueing. You've decided you've already done short-term memory. Next time you hear it, if you have something that you shake to make the sound, you're going to keep going. If you don't have something that you shake, you're going to stop. So if you shake, keep shaking. Now everybody, and boom, dun dun, dun dun dun. What's your name? Ardith. So in just a minute, I'm going to cut you off. Ardith is going to play something. You're going to listen, and then you're going to play what Ardith is playing. You can play anything. Ready, and stop. Everybody do that. And four, 3, 2, and 1. Ta-da. So the way I would shape that is I would see who is communicating. How are they communicating? We would work a lot on memory and long term, because often I will do this towards the beginning of one of these groups and then say, what was your rhythm at the end of your group? It's also great because we have like 5 different kinds of attention, and this works all of them. So I would like to, it is noon, straight up noon. If you have an extra 3 minutes, I would like to have you all do a listening exercise. If you need to go, please do. This listening exercise is something that I have done. I have to be very aware of people's groundedness with something like this. So we're going to listen to this piece, and if you have any sort of wiggles in you, or if you have anxiety at any time, if those waves of anxiety comes, this is something that's nice to do, is choose a piece of music, and then as you listen to it, see if your brain can follow one part of the music, whether it's an instrumental part or the part that's just the prettiest to you. Just so you can set your instruments down, because this is something I can pick up when we're done.
Introducing custom.
Yeah, there's always the ads. And so get yourselves as comfortable as you can. Yeah. If it feels okay to shut your eyes, you certainly can do that too.